Welcome back to the SampanViking on China channel. Today I'm going to talk on a subject which I've entitled The Truth About Colour Revolutions. And this is an extension of the events which have happened in Kazakhstan last week and are still technically ongoing, although it looks very stabilized now, at least being brought fairly rapidly under control. But it brings sharply into focus elements of the Western-sponsored regime change operations that are known commonly as colour revolutions. It has shown us things that I think that some people would rather have not been made quite so apparent. This is a subject I have rather harked on about quite a bit over the course of this channel in various guises, and, and to be honest, there's nothing really new that we didn't already know that's been exposed by the events last week, but the difference is it's one thing to theorize, it's another to see the direct evidence. Circumstantial, you might say, but still direct evidence. You're never going to get the smoking gun from, the US Secretary of State or anything. This is as good as it gets, and it is the ability to compare. And so to start off, I think I'm just going to quickly run over what the hallmarks of what colour revolution is and the hallmarks of them. The colour revolutions, well, it's just a convenient term. Somebody on a forum I visit coined the phrase a woke vegetarian term, was a vegan term or something, to cover what is a very ugly and nefarious business. They are Western-sponsored regime change operations using local forces, backed, supported, and coordinated with outside intelligence agencies. And typically, the course of a colour revolution will follow something along these lines. There will be a building up, a concerted building up of tensions over an issue, enough to convince enough people that they want to stand out and protest about it. Again, the organisation to get the protests up and running at the right time is something that is usually beyond the abilities of many local organisations, especially if it's happening in multiple locations within the target country. But anyway, it starts off with a legitimate, if you like, protest of one sort or another. And as soon as there are significant numbers out in the street, then there are the shadowy extremists, imported, indigenous, whatever, be it ardent nationalists, be it religious extremists, mixture of the two, doesn't really matter. The heavy mob are then brought in and serious trouble kicks off. And that can be simply to cause a provocation to which the authorities need to respond. And in all of these things, the media will ignore the aggression by the demonstrators, the rioters, who will be described always as peaceful and pro-democracy protesters, and any response, any reaction by law enforcement in those countries will be described as aggressive and heavy-handed, and the situation will then spiral out of control from there. It's been illustrated in many different forms in many different countries over the last 20 years. It always starts the same, and it always takes up a certain course of events. You have a large number of people out in the streets, you create a provocation, that provocation generates real anger, and that anger is capitalized on and hijacked by serious militant forces with an agenda of their own, or following an agenda which has been given to them, rather, by outside intelligence agencies for the purposes of overthrowing a government that the Western powers do not like, in order for that they can put in place a more pliant, compliant puppet regime, for want of a better expression. We've seen this in many, many places. The most notable, of course, most notable success, of course, being Ukraine in 2014. It was the second bite of the cherry. There had been one earlier, a few years earlier, 2008, I seem to recall, where it had been defeated. Something was tried like that in Syria. That's how it started. And of course, we had similar things in places like Georgia, which again led to a situation where a fervently pro-Western leader was installed, which led to ultimately, in that case, to a short war with the Russian Federation, an aggression launched by the Georgians themselves, which was quickly put down. We've also seen similar attempts in attempts to cause a color revolution in places like Xinjiang in Western China, and of course in Hong Kong itself, for purposes which, again, we don't want to get too caught up in different aims in different locations, or simply as a way of spreading further discontent and problems in other parts of very large countries, or to completely turn smaller and weaker countries. But we have seen this happen, and one of the hallmarks of the colour revolution is the wall-to-wall, instantaneous wall-to-wall coverage by the media, Western politicians, all with exactly the same narrative, all with exactly the same agendas, all very much on message, telling a very, very concise narrative as to what's going on and why we should be supporting the people in the streets protesting. And it happens remarkably quickly. In fact, it happens so quickly, the events have barely happened, and the knowledge of them reverberated around in the public consciousness before the media is there giving it 24/7 constant rotating headline stuff, constant 24-hour news cycle headlines going on indefinitely and evolving, usually in terms of the script when as the story unfolds. Always there seems to be senior journalists, senior reporters for the media organizations conveniently on site just as the thing kicks off. And when they speak to random passers-by in the crowd, lo and behold, they seem to find people who speak very good English, and on further examination just happen to be heads of Western-funded NGOs of one sort or another. So a very staged, very contrived set of circumstances by which a concerted effort is being made to achieve a certain political result, usually the overthrow of a government that the West does not like and the installation of a new government that it does. These regime change operations are not simple. They are very, very complicated because it involves the coordination of many and disparate groups, those on the ground, those in the media, not just Western media, but other media as well, and of course the talking heads from think tanks and governments and political parties, etc. All of them to play a part, all of them to speak the right part of the narrative at the right time, in accordance to a schedule that is usually very, very finely and well planned. As I said before, these operations are like super tankers. They're very powerful once they get going, but if anything happens that they need to change course, this causes a lot of difficulty because they need a lot of space and a lot of time in order to make any kind of maneuver. And we have seen that. That has been uh, one of the initial clues that what we suspected about the truth of colour revolutions was indeed the case. Because the classic example for me is the 2018 alleged chemical weapons attack in Douma in Syria. I have absolutely no doubt that the plan here was for a carefully coordinated atrocity that was going to be blamed on the Russians, and that it was intended to be carried out using a Russian-made nerve gas. Undoubtedly, it would have been a Novichok gas, and there's another story associated with that, but I won't go into now. And the purpose of this was to vilify the Russians to such a degree that maybe even to usher them out of Syria because they had been complicit in a chemical weapons attack, and thus abandon President Assad and the Syrian government and army, so that what was left of the terrorist forces, regime change forces, could again be rallied, and maybe this time able to finish the job that they had started quite a few years earlier. Well, something along the line went drastically wrong. It came very, very late. By the time the chemical incident happened, the fighting had already effectively stopped. Douma, the area, which had been an enclave close to Damascus, totally totally surrounded by this government-controlled territory. This imploded after a successful, prolonged attack. It had held up for a long time, but its time had come. It was attacked properly by the Syrians with Russian support, and the enclave, the terrorist enclave, collapsed. Right at the end, there was an incident. Well, at first there were people talking about nerve gas in this, and it came on by clockwork, as if a light had gone on. No sooner were the reports circulating that something had happened, the media switched into full attack mode, and these stories were coming out. Initially, they were talking about nerve gas and talking about Russia being involved. Very soon, it turned out that not only had the fighting already stopped and that the area was pretty much already under government control when the attack happened, but there was only chlorine involved. There was no nerve gas there at all. But the narrative carried on, and it was increasingly bizarre to listen to what was being said and claimed compared to what was actually being reported on the ground. And even to the point we had in the UK very senior former military generals, field marshals, senior heads of the army coming on onto TV and saying something here is not right. It doesn't make sense that Assad would do this at this stage. He'd already won the battle. Why would he do something that was only going to play into the hands of his enemies and be a valid excuse for intervention by Western forces of one sort or another? Nobody believed it. And that exposed the great weakness of these projects, is that they are indeed very complicated and very difficult to adjust once something goes wrong. Now, this, of course, brings us to Kazakhstan last week, because from a situation where we are being told effectively that these colour revolutions were grassroots, spontaneous protests, and the media response to it, and media political response to it, was likewise just reactive and with people quickly on the ground, because that's the great power and ability of the Western media. We can do this sort of thing. Suddenly in Kazakhstan, this exposed the totally false nature of this premise, because what happened in Kazakhstan was, on the face of it, a genuinely spontaneous set of protests, and this resulted in other forces, because color revolutions have been planned for the former Soviet space in southern Asia. I've talked about that in various other videos, and in fact I'll put a link to a long video I did quite a few months ago on this very subject at the end of this video. These forces, obviously in a state of despair, having watched their US sponsors depart Afghanistan, and therefore effectively say that whatever had been planned for them was no longer going to happen. They saw people on the streets. They saw that this was their time, and this would probably include people within the establishment who favoured being the people who replaced the current government after the coup, took it as their cue to get onto the streets and to start to launch the revolution. Well, there was no coordinated media response. There was no concise narrative. There was no uniform reply, uniform message from the West and the mainstream media. There was indeed utter confusion, disarray, and everybody. the media themselves being unsure as to who the good guys actually were. So because you had one lot of protesters who seemed to be protesting against the former president. Well, the former president, Libayev, was actually a fairly pro-Western character, very good friend, as I said in the last video, of Sir Anthony Blair, former U.S. Prime Minister, but they were protesting against him. It seems then that counter-protesters, maybe, I'm waiting to clarify that, came out, but certainly the militants came out, and they were against the current incumbent, and they were part of the power struggle between that prompted the CSTO to get involved, peacekeeping troops to come in for freeing up, the taking control by the current president of the security forces from the previous president, and a rapid crushing of the militant forces on the ground, in as far as they could present a serious paramilitary threat against simply a police force. All happened fairly quickly, and the media are only now really starting to play catch up. This is in stark contrast to what we've seen in the genuinely planned colour revolutions, where everything has been slick, concise, and working like clockwork. We get a genuine spontaneous protest, which is taken advantage of by forces, and there is utter disarray in the ranks of media and Western political leaders. They don't know. They're waiting for the cue. They're waiting for somebody to tell them what to say, what's going on, and nothing is said. It was largely from, instead of being headlines, it was a back of the bulletin feature. All very embarrassing, really, for the regime change professionals in the West. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to stop it there. It's gone on far too long, really. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like. If you would like other people to listen to what I have to say, please hit the share button. If you don't subscribe to this channel, please do. It helps this channel to grow, and it costs you absolutely nothing. And if you would like to add your own comments to what I've said, or simply discuss the channel in general, please leave a comment and I will reply where appropriate. In the meantime, I will thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to you joining me in the next video.